basically, the truss lands management system or business systems in general are, it's not a unique problem to Montana. It's not a unique problem to many of you. And so really what we wanted to do was just talk a little bit about our project that's in play, our journey, if you will, kind of moving towards this thing. Trying to give you sort of a practical lens about what this thing looks like, some of the trials and tribulations we've gone through, and some of the lessons learned that we've encountered, at least at this point in the process. And so the neat thing is that we got several of our project team actually in the room. Craig is our CIO within DNRC. And so we've got a lot of folks here that our hope is to kind of move through a little bit of a preload on why we selected this direction, why we went down this path. We're going to look at sort of the DNRC version. We're going to look at sort of Sitka's thoughts and sort of hearing sort of the technical side of this a little bit further through their lens. Emma then is going to move into sort of a demonstration of what at least the first piece of this looks like. And so, and we're purposefully going to leave a chunk of time to kind of have some dialogue, have some Q&A at the end of this thing. So I think if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. If you want to kind of wait for those benchmarks within sort of our presentation, maybe there might be more appropriate times to dig into some of these pieces. So, for the purposes of this presentation, we talked about who's who. I think just kind of, center around a very basic planning logic. And so I'm just going to kind of talk through what do you have, what do you want, how do you get what you want as we move through this. What do we have? Our current TLMS system is a 15-year-old system that's gone through several upgrades over its life. That's improved some functionality. But it's also kind of forced us into a little bit of a corner. The most current version is a .NET version, which I think one more upgrade puts us at a standstill because it's not supported anymore. And I think often folks kind of encounter some of these scenarios where the system kind of outgrows the software that's available to it. For us, it's limited. There's a number of different pieces and parts that cause us a little bit of concern. We don't have any ability to track activity other than the last person that modified it. So you can imagine in a financial world that you really want to have a little better accountability, a little better tracking process for that. It really lacks any spatial framework. It's completely tabular where we sit today, and you'll see in a minute how that's changing and moving forward. And really our current system, one of our biggest challenges is that it's not complete, it's not comprehensive, it requires significant workarounds in order to get us to where we need to be. It's a matter of grabbing significant amounts of tabular data and then working outside of the system to get at the numbers that you're actually looking for. What I wanted to do is kind of quickly navigate a sidebar that sort of gives you a foundation of why we made the decisions we made. And so, truss lands, state of Montana, I'm sure you've heard this over the last couple of days, 5.2 million surface, 6.2 subsurface. This is a snapshot into sort of the forest management side of it. The forest management program is data rich. And I think that from our standpoint, we're looking at 800,000 acres. The significant majority of that is commercial. Lots of supporting data that basically supports that particular program. We've got data sets that, this is just an example of our stand level inventory. You see that, Sean? And so we're going to look at that this afternoon. That's this acquisition. But a stand level inventory is 35,000 polygons deep, anywhere ranging from 5 to 500 acres, about 200 fields long. And so you can imagine that while this is great and it's helping us move forward, one of our big issues that we have with data in a data-rich program, and I call this the tar paper shack syndrome, is that it's built on, and it's built on, and it's built on, and it's built on. And so you'll see sort of this logic, I think it also carries to our current TLMS system, that there's a point of diminishing return where you really reach that breaking point where you're losing reliability, confidence, functionality, user interface. You start dissolving and blurring some of those things. And so we're really fighting this tar paper shack syndrome. Really looking anybody who's working deep in data is really looking to precisely define, easily integrate, and effectively consume. So where have we come? Over the last three plus years, the Trust Lands program, specifically forest management, but it's also bled into other trust land programs, has been this wholesale migration over to an ArcGIS Online platform. And so really it's changing how we acquire, manage, and consume that data. It's working off of ArcGIS Collector, working off of Survey 1, 2, 3, etc. So basically it's moving us to more of a data cloud concept. And so we have local data, sort of a loose enterprise, if you will, but really migrating to this ArcGIS desktop to really an SDE or a full cloud platform, whether it's on Amazon server farms or what have you, has really transformed how we develop these data sets into data systems that are consumable. And so for us, not all blue squares are alike. Those are questions we ask. And so one of the things that this is starting to kind of work towards is decision support and understanding why we perform this activity on this particular blue square versus another one, whether it's maximizing revenue points or what have you. So again, working back to this wholesale ability to more precisely define, easily integrate, and effectively consume. One of the big parts of moving into this platform too gives us offline capability. And so for us, there's a lot of our country that does not have cell service. And so how do you cleanly acquire data and then synchronize that back to a central data system? And so this little sidebar, basically why I bring this up is that you'll see this corollary to the new TLMS, we call it 2.0, the rebuild for now. And so let's move into sort of the what do we want? Our basis. Current TLMS is 19,000 customer records, about 56,000 separate contracts in any one year. We process about 31,000 receipts, about 30,000 invoices, ballpark 80 to 100 million a year. Really, we're looking at about 2.5 million spatial records that's loosely tied to the current TLMS. Our current program serves 4 bureaus, but it also serves 3 other divisions within the department. This is our cash-in process. All cash that comes into the department is actually handled through TLMS. And then I talked about sort of this evolution of ArcGIS Online and the role that it plays within our program. So what do you want? I'm not going to have you read all this. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. We did an RFI in 2016, a request for information, really highlighting sort of the process of auditing for changes in transactions, looking at historical audit data, making it configurable, and allowing sort of that process of notification to come into play. Other things that we really were purposely looking for are to create assigned roles, sort of this customized user interface, advanced query functionality, accessing and integrating external data, and of course the spatial framework was a big one. And then the other piece for us is a public portal. How do we get the general public access to this system? But to take that one step further, how do we get our clients to potentially be able to manage some of their workflow on an online public-facing data set? This was something that was put together in 17 by WSLCA. And so this is that white paper that's looking at business systems. And I tell you, moving into our sort of this TLMS rebuild, we took this paper to heart. And actually, if you are familiar with it, or if you're not, and you're looking at doing this, read it, look through it, because I think it's loose methodology, but it's valid methodology. We actually captured significant pieces and parts as we kind of defined our path forward. So Big thanks to Wes Licka for putting the effort into this, and if there's folks in the room that played a part in this, thank you. For us, we're just going to touch on, the first piece of this, and John's actually going to talk a little bit more about this, but we did a data analysis, sort of a business analysis, and this was not only a deep dive into what our current TLMS system provides for us today, but also looking at just our fundamental business workflows. What do we need that the current system does not afford? And so with that in mind, it was looking at, as I mentioned, current and future business processes and requirements, but also looked at items like project goals, prioritization, looking at workflow diagrams, ultimately looking at alternatives with perhaps a recommendation coming out of this. And so John will talk more about that. So in today's terms, we're hopefully getting away from this tar paper shack. We've got this nice new structure in place, but it's not finished. It needs skirting. There's no chimney on this thing. And so we've got work to go to get this finished, but we've got a more comprehensive approach with better accuracy, better timeliness, better consumability. Some important byproducts out of this process are that it really helped evolve our relationships. And in DNRC, we've got a centralized IT function. And we had really good working relationships because of some other work that I'm not going to go into. But what this did was took a really complex project and really established some of those boundaries, some of those roles, some of those expectations. And so I think, this isn't the only complex project you guys are taking on. Water Resources has a big one coming online. And so that was a really interesting kind of byproduct on this. It really allowed us to get a better sense of where we need to outsource pieces and parts, because we can't do everything internally, nor can we do everything externally. And it really kind of established the need to be very nimble in this process. So let's move towards how do we get what we want. Just a quick snapshot, this turned into a 4-phase, 4-year project. And so the first phase we kind of cobbled together internally. It was about $500,000. And really it was this proof of concept that we were looking at. And so we knew where we wanted this to land, but it was a little bit blurry, didn't quite understand. Sitka, I think, had not taken on this complex or this scale of a project. I think, and you guys may talk to that a little bit. And so just finding whether we could get to that common ground in such a way that there was safety there, and that there was a willingness to kind of continue forging forward and that relationship and that comfort. And so for us, phase 1 actually was just completed. This MVP stands for minimum viable product. And so that was that proof of concept phase. It was predominantly working in forest management and establishing a lot of the infrastructure internally, within DNRC. And so we just wrapped that up, and we're going to demo that in a little bit here. Phase 2 actually just got signed yesterday. And so we're kicking that off formally, moving that forward. That's focusing on sort of a land inventory piece, and ultimately it's going to build, we have 3 modules for our financial piece, and so all 3 of those modules are coming online over the next year. Phase 3 and 4 then is going to involve our remaining bureaus, and so it's going to capitalize on minerals, ag and grazing, and the remaining real estate pieces. And so that's really where this is moving forward. Some early takeaways, at least from phase 1, is you really need to be fully engaged. And so we clearly could have pounded this out in 1 year. I mean, it would have taken substantial ramp up on Sitka's part, but also would have required substantial commitment and time capacity on trust lands. And the reality is that, we're a pretty lean operation in a really big state, and everybody's really busy. And so knowing that you can pick this thing apart in such a way that you can fully engage, you can provide that attention to detail and get yourself to those milestones as they're established. We talked about establishing these roles and expectations between client and contractor, and so really kind of finding that sweet spot, understanding where you can push and where you can't, and knowing that you can get to a better place cooperatively rather than feeling like you're battling all the time. Discussing preload heavy decisions. One of my biggest worries, full disclosure, I'm not an IT person, as you can probably tell, by my dialogue. Not by my personal I don't know, there's some big IT people, right? So basically, I'm not a TLMS user either. And so I didn't come into this project to take on this role because of my knowledge of TLMS. It was really because of my knowledge of data and my working experience of taking significant data sets, complex problems, and finding ways to fully integrate and to get that in a very practical fashion in the hands of consumers. And so getting the people on the ground where the rubber hits the road, I think that's why I stepped into this role. Agile works, and so one of the things we're doing with Sitka is an agile development process, which means really that this thing is broken down into what we call sprints, and those sprints are dealt with on a weekly basis. And so you're focusing, you have intense focus on specific pieces and parts as you move through it. But what that allows or does not allow is for the ability of the project team or the momentum to carry out some bunny trail and waste a bunch of money on the project or time on the project doing things that may not necessarily be most appropriate. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I use the word sprint in terms of agile, but the project is a marathon. And so you just got to stay the course, take a little bit of a leap of faith. For us, it's understanding, at least to our end clients, our recipients, that you do your best to under-promise and over-deliver. I think oftentimes in builds like this, you over-promise and under-deliver, and so it forces credibility issues, trust, really kind of pushes pressure on that relationship.